Hi, my name is Jill Goldstein Smith, and I created this online course as part of our final project, and it is focused on mental health and social emotional well being at camp. So, I created this course and designed it with my workplace in mind. I work at the Foundation for Jewish Camp, which doesn't run any summer camps, but it does provide resources and tools to support nonprofit Jewish camps all across North America, especially their staff. So here's a little overview of the course. Just a brief overview that includes the intended audience and the timeline, which would be 8 weeks during the school year prior to camp starting, probably in the spring semester when a lot of camps are done hiring, but they are not quite in summer yet. And here's also some learning outcomes. I'm not going to read all of them, but they really range from decreasing stigma simply by talking about mental health to creating a deeper and broader toolbox for frontline camp staff to be able to support their campers and their peers in ways that are appropriate given their roles as counselors and not mental health professionals. And in the first week, we will talk a little bit more about their roles and some boundaries, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But also in the last week, to also jump ahead, that by the end of the course that they'll be able to create a self-care plan, thinking about their own mental health. The course is going to be structured mostly asynchronous so that camp staff from all across North America can participate, but there will be a few synchronous meetups sprinkled throughout the course, a kickoff, something mid-session that might be hosted a couple of times so that everyone can have a chance to participate, and also something that will be actually not a part of the course, but after the course before people go off to camp. Each module is going to be different, but they're going to have some typical same structure to it, including a video by the facilitator to frame the module and bridge it from the previous week's work, as well as some media to review and respond to, and activities that really have a heavy emphasis with providing experiential opportunities for engagement and not solely one particular modality each week. And I've also listed some deadlines here that I won't get into the specifics of, but because I'm working mostly with a Jewish population, although not everybody is Jewish or observes in the same way, I tried to keep that in mind when creating these deadline timelines. So, of course, there's going to be a challenge to any kind of online course or any course in general. I've listed some here. I don't want to dwell too much on the roadblocks, but I do think that it's important to acknowledge so that we can plan intentionally with them in mind whenever possible. For instance, if I'm doing this in the spring semester, there might be spring breaks, camps delayed in hiring staff that might want to jump in mid-course. How do I respond to that? Passover and Easter holidays. If this is happening for college students and they're not necessarily getting credit for it, what does that mean competing with school requirements? Is there something else other than being an awesomely motivated learner that they can get out of this? Maybe partnering with camps or a stipend or a cool certificate, and a few other things too. But diving into the weekly modules that would be a part of this, I have it broken down right now into 6 weekly modules, knowing that there would be some synchronous weeks in there too. For a lot of these, the first one especially, even though every week I would ask, I myself would have an introductory video. I wanted them to be able to introduce themselves a little bit. I think that that's really important to see not just my persona in my campy tie-dye, but also, which I hope, given the tools right now, I think in the way that I'm sharing my screen, might get recorded in this. I'm using Zoom right now, which is an online tool I'm mostly comfortable with and really enjoy using the breakout rooms for. Anyways, I think that it's important for the learners to get to actually see themselves a little bit. Then also doing, like I mentioned before, different modalities and starting off by talking about what are boundaries, even though this course is talking about mental health and some personal sharing might go on, the difference between learning and discussing and therapy, that this is not a therapeutic course. And then the second module would be talking about actually starting to apply some tools and learning some tools, going through to the next week, listening, awareness, how do we actually become aware of issues going on at camp. Building off of awareness, diving deeper into different kinds of listening, empathetic listening and active listening. I would want to demonstrate with YouTube videos, and then also give a cool little mini quiz for fun, not for grading, but learning some differences. What do verbal and nonverbal communication mean and how those can be interpreted differently? And then having people actually in what in the Jewish tradition we call Havruta, which comes from the term for friends, but pairs, actually pairing up together and recording each other having a video chat, practicing skills, and then posting it for me to review, possibly for each other to review, but that would be a lot to observe. And then the fifth module is talking about the difference between giving assurance and advice, and what does it mean to be a near peer, a camp counselor who's 18 and working with 16-year-olds. How do you be a role model while that line between being a friend, especially when you're talking about mental health and supporting people. In week 2, we'll also have talked about a case study, which I'll dive into more. But by this week, by week 5, I want to revisit that case study. And now that they have additional tools, how would they apply that given the same case, but with knowing more about what their options might be and what they might do differently? And the last main week of the course, I want to talk about self-care. I have some visuals up here that dive into some of the metaphors around self-care. And I thought it would be really fun to have them not just make a self-care plan to keep themselves accountable, but also to, as a way of sharing in some of our last time together as a course, to snap a selfie of them engaging in some of those self-care activities, and also sharing their own social media handles if they're willing to, so that they can support one another throughout the summer and give likes and thumbs up and emojis and that kind of thing to continue the support and learning throughout the year. All right, so that's a whole lot, and I want to get to some of the actual course. I think that this project requires knowing a little bit more, and so even though I'm not going to go into these numbers right now, if somebody does want to pause and look at this project at some point, I wanted to share some background about mental health these days in North America, mostly in America, I should say specifically. These numbers are from the National Alliance on Mental Health. And here's some information that's specific to mental health and summer camp that's from the American Camp Association. One challenge with teaching in general is, especially when you've created something like a PowerPoint or other media tool that seems set and ready to go and able to be reused year after year, is being able to constantly and consistently adapt and keeping facts and references up to date. You can see that these numbers are from 2017, although they are the most updated that I was able to find. So week 1's module is about laying the groundwork, boundaries and definitions of mental health. People might disagree on what those are, but I think that it's really important to start this course with a shared language, for at least for this course. So one thing that I would share is that we all have mental health, and the question of, does it impact our ability to live, laugh, and love, is a starting place around mental health. But the module that I want to walk us a little more deeply through is week 2, which is focused on introducing one of many frameworks that exist for responding to mental health. So this module would start as I would start each week with a short introduction video by me, the facilitator, or if I was writing this curriculum for somebody else, which would reference the previous week's work and link it to the coming module. So the week before, we have introduced ourselves via short videos and also participated in an exercise of illustrating what some mental health diagnoses might look like. It's not about offending people, but making something that can be very personable and intangible become a little more concrete, plus using our imagination before diving into some very heavy, sometimes triggering topics. I did want to make sure to credit Gemma Carell here. You can see more of her work, just as some examples. Each week is also going to include Judaic content. I do work for Foundation for Jewish Camp, so that's a piece of it. This might be a Bible story, a piece of text, an Ellie Talk, which is like a Jewish version of the TED Talk, or something else. The goal is to frame each week's module with a little more context than just my personal opinions or references, and so that it can be introduced in a way that's a little more cultural commentary than religious, since camp counselors and camps are all different backgrounds. Some are Jewish, some not as Jewish, all across the spectrum religiously and culturally and politically. So the first activity that we would do during this module that I wanted to do that would dive into something a little more dynamic is looking at how does mental health show up in a typical day at camp. So I've created, if you are able to click on this link, a sample camp schedule that's available for editing through Google Docs. And each learner would add a couple of possible moments and ways that might trigger an issue related to camper or staff mental health, whether it's diagnosed or situational. One example is during the afternoon rest hour when campers might be writing letters home, some feelings of missing home or homesickness, as some people call it, or late at night when counselors might go out and leave the bunk. There could be some bullying, which could result in a lot of mental health issues there coming up to light. And I like this tool because people can comment on each other's comments. Then we would dive into that framework that I talked about. So first there was some reflection, how is this relevant to my actual life at camp? And now I want to give them some tangible tools. So mental health first aid in particular is a course that's offered by the National Council of Behavioral Health. And while this online course that I'm creating is not to give that kind of certification, it will use some of the best practices that the course offers and suggests. And those who choose to do so will be able to enroll in the Mental Health First Aid 8-hour in-person certification course through their camp at a later date. So there's an opportunity for some additional online or in-person learning beyond this course. And this is just walking through some of the different action plans that Mental Health First Aid gives us, which is going to be relevant because the next piece in this module is a case study where people will be able to choose between 2 or 3 different situations that I would post online. And then they could choose which scenario they wanted to engage with using the action plan steps that we saw on the last page that use the acronym ALGE: awareness, listening, giving reassurance, etc. Then they'll be asked to write a blog post using that action plan model, sharing and outlining some of the steps they might take, in addition to commenting on at least 2 classmates' posts. Positive, wondering, questioning. It would be optional if they wanted to comment on each other's comments. But I'm hoping to start to create, even in this second week, a culture of engaging with one another. Throughout the course, I'll sprinkle some mental health motivation. All of the materials week to week are things that the counselors can use during the summer for them to reference back to or share with their fellow staff members. Here you can see some self-care reward stickers by the artist that I showed before. And that's an overview of the course. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was interesting for you a little bit of a taste. I would be excited to delve more into some of these, and I'm really excited to hear your feedback, what you think would work, what won't work, and thanks so much. Happy summer.